Imagine a cargo ship the size of a small town pulling into port and being turned away. In April, a single vessel carrying 300,000 tons of soybeans arrived at a Chinese port, and China rejected the whole lot. That's the equivalent of about 10,000 fully loaded 30-ton trucks rolling up and being sent home. On the surface, everything looked normal. Paperwork, labels, and origin certificates said Argentina. But customs dug a little deeper and found clues that pointed somewhere else, the United States. So what happened? Were these really Argentine soybeans, or were they American beans wearing fake passports? Over the next several minutes, I'll show you the full story. The political pressure that made sellers desperate, the tricks exporters tried, the lab tests and GPS tracks that exposed the deception, and the fallout for Argentina, Brazil, and global trade. By the end, you'll understand why one rejected ship became a window into a new kind of trade war, where science, blockchain, and geopolitics collide. To understand why this one shipment caused such a stir, we need to look at why soybeans are so important to China in the first place. China has a population of about 1.4 billion people, and even though the country grows a huge amount of food, especially rice, wheat, and corn, soybeans are the exception. China simply doesn't grow enough of them to meet its own needs. In 2024, China produced about 20 million tons of soybeans. Sounds like a lot, right? But the actual demand was more than 5 times higher. That gap has to be filled from abroad. And this isn't just about tofu or soy sauce. Most soybeans are crushed into animal feed, especially for pigs and chickens. No soybeans means no affordable meat, which means rising food prices, something any government wants to avoid. So every year, China imports massive amounts of soybeans, around 105 million tons recently. To picture that, imagine a line of freight trains long enough to circle the Earth, twice. And the majority of those imports usually come from only 2 countries, Brazil and the United States. Argentina plays a smaller but still important role because its soybeans tend to be cheaper. This dependence makes soybeans a strategic resource, just like oil or natural gas. And when tensions rise between major economies, supply chains like this become political pressure points. That's where the real story begins, because when tariffs and trade conflicts entered the picture, everything changed. The turning point came when trade tensions between China and the United States escalated again. When the U.S. government raised tariffs on Chinese products, China immediately responded by placing its own tariffs on American agricultural goods, including soybeans. And this mattered a lot because China is the single biggest buyer of U.S. soybeans in the world. Losing that customer isn't just a small dent. It's like suddenly losing your only major client. Before the tariffs, the U.S. exported tens of millions of tons of soybeans to China every year. Farmers in states like Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota relied on those sales. But once tariffs hit, Chinese companies began shifting their purchases to Brazil and Argentina instead, where soybeans came with no added tax cost. Overnight, many U.S. soybean exporters found themselves with huge stockpiles and nowhere profitable to send them. Imagine being a farmer who spent the whole year planting, harvesting, storing, and shipping, only to find out your main customer backed away. Warehouses filled up, prices dropped. Some farmers took losses. Exporters tried to wait it out, but the tariffs kept rising and the market didn't bounce back. And that's where the problem began. Because as the pressure grew, some sellers started searching for creative solutions. If soybeans clearly labeled Made in USA faced high tariffs in China, but soybeans from Argentina did not, then somebody asked a dangerous question. What if we just make U.S. soybeans look like they came from Argentina? This was the moment where economic pressure turned into incentive for fraud and set the stage for the 300,000-ton shipment to sail across the Pacific wearing a disguise. In April, the plan seemed perfect. A cargo ship left Argentina carrying what appeared to be 300,000 tons of soybeans, bound for China. The documents looked flawless. Certificates of origin, customs forms, export licenses, all clearly stamped Argentina. Even the packaging on the soybean sacks matched what you'd expect from South American exporters. When the ship arrived at Tianjin port, everything looked legitimate at first glance. Customs officials began their routine inspections, but something felt off. For one, the protein levels listed on the import documents seemed unusually high for Argentine soybeans. Argentina's soil and climate typically produce beans with a protein content below 34%. But this shipment? It clocked in at 35.1%, which coincidentally matched the exact profile of U.S. soybeans. Then came another clue: the sacks themselves. Many were manufactured by companies based in the United States, something Chinese inspectors could trace by the product codes printed on the material. When they combined these physical details with the protein data, suspicions deepened quickly. It was as if someone had carefully dressed American soybeans in Argentine clothing. Fake passport, new outfit, but the same DNA underneath. China's customs authority decided to launch a deeper investigation, analyzing everything from the freight route to shipping logs and even microscopic residue data left on the beans. Soon the pattern became clear. These soybeans had likely started their journey not in Argentina, but in the American Midwest. In the end, Chinese authorities rejected the entire cargo, all 300,000 tons, and ordered it returned. For U.S. exporters, it was a costly failure. But for China, it was proof that their inspection systems were sharper than ever. China's customs officials didn't just rely on paperwork, they turned to science. In recent years, China has developed advanced methods to verify the geographic origin of imported goods, and soybeans have become one of their top targets. The first tool they used is called stable isotope analysis. Here's how it works. Every region's soil, water, and climate leave tiny, measurable chemical fingerprints inside plants. Think of it like the accent in someone's voice. You can tell where they're from just by how they sound. Similarly, soybeans grown in the U.S. Midwest absorb slightly different ratios of elements like carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen than those grown in Argentina or Brazil. So when inspectors ran lab tests on the samples, the accents didn't match Argentina's. Instead, the data pointed directly to the Great Plains region of the United States. But that wasn't all. China also cross-checked satellite and shipping data. They compared the ship's AIS, that's Automatic Identification System, basically GPS tracking for vessels, to known export patterns. The route showed some unusual behavior. The vessel made a brief stop near a U.S. port before heading toward South America. That was a massive red flag. In addition, AI-based cargo databases analyzed trade volumes. They noticed that Argentina hadn't exported any soybean batch of that size on the same dates, yet paperwork claimed it did. The numbers simply didn't add up. Together, these clues formed an airtight case. The soybeans were American, not Argentine. When the results came in, Chinese customs didn't just reject the shipment, they made it public. The message was clear. We're watching closely. Don't try to cheat the system. The rejection of that 300,000-ton shipment didn't just embarrass a few exporters, it shook the global soybean market. Within days, prices on the Chicago Board of Trade dipped as traders panicked, fearing tighter Chinese controls and more rejected shipments. Meanwhile, in Argentina and Brazil, soybean prices jumped slightly because China immediately turned to them for replacement orders. Let's start with the United States. American exporters were already struggling from China's tariffs, and this incident made things worse. Not only were they locked out of the Chinese market, now they were also being closely watched by every other major buyer. Trust was damaged. Chinese importers began inserting stricter verification clauses into contracts to ensure no indirect U.S. origin. Some even refused to buy from intermediaries who had any ties to U.S. suppliers. For Argentina, it was a mix of good and bad news. On one hand, demand for real Argentine soybeans soared, great for legitimate exporters. But on the other, the scandal tainted their image. Chinese buyers began asking for extra certification to prove authenticity, slowing trade and increasing costs. It was like being a restaurant that suddenly has to show proof that every ingredient is real after one customer finds a fake. Brazil, on the other hand, quietly celebrated. Already China's biggest soybean supplier, Brazil used the chaos to strengthen its position even more. Their exports to China spiked, and major Brazilian trading companies began signing long-term contracts to lock in Chinese buyers nervous about US or Argentine risks. Meanwhile, China itself walked away looking strong. The message was that no shipment, no matter how cleverly disguised, could slip through unnoticed. It showed how far Chinese customs had come, not just as regulators, but as global enforcers of trade integrity. But underneath all that success, a bigger question started to emerge. A question that could reshape future trade. If countries can fake where goods come from this easily, how can anyone trust made-in labels anymore? After the soybean scandal, one thing became crystal clear. Paper documents weren't enough anymore. A few fake stamps, some copied signatures, and a rerouted shipment were all it took to move 300,000 tons of misdeclared cargo halfway around the world. That scared a lot of governments and trading companies, not just in China, but everywhere. So, the race began to create a digital truth system for global trade. One of the most promising tools is blockchain technology. You've probably heard of it in the context of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. But in trade, blockchain has a very different purpose: transparency. Here's how it works. Every step in a shipment's journey, from the farm to the silo to the port to the ship, is logged on a secure, unchangeable digital ledger. Once information is written into the blockchain, no one can alter or delete it without leaving a trace. It's like giving every bag of soybeans its own digital passport that customs officials can scan and instantly verify. Some major agricultural traders, like Cargill and Louis Dreyfus, are already testing blockchain-based tracking systems in cooperation with Chinese ports. The goal is that within a few years, customs won't just check paper certificates. They'll scan a digital ID that shows the exact GPS coordinates of where the crops were grown. China, too, is developing its own national traceability platform that links customs data, satellite imagery, and shipping logs into one unified database. Think of it as a digital detective that cross-checks every shipment automatically. If this system works, incidents like the Argentine soybeans could become a thing of the past, not because people suddenly became more honest, but because lying will simply become impossible. The soybean scandal wasn't just about one ship or one company. It was a snapshot of a world where economics, politics, and technology are colliding. It showed that when nations weaponize trade through tariffs and sanctions, people and companies start finding creative, and sometimes illegal, ways around the system. Think about it. Those soybeans didn't try to disguise themselves. Humans did. It was a direct response to political decisions made thousands of miles away, decisions that turned a normal commodity into a political pawn. And this isn't just about soybeans. The same thing is happening with semiconductors, oil, rare earths, and even electric vehicle batteries. Whenever one country blocks another, someone somewhere tries to reroute the flow, legally or not. For China, the lesson was clear. Trade control is power. The ability to detect, verify, and regulate imports isn't just about safety. It's about strategic leverage. Every successful detection strengthens China's hand in global markets and tells the world, we know what's coming in, and from where. For the U.S., the incident exposed how fragile agricultural exports have become when politics interfere with business. Farmers, the backbone of rural America, ended up paying the price for decisions made in Washington and Beijing. And for the rest of the world, the message was sobering. Trust in global trade is eroding. Paper certificates and made-in labels used to be enough. Now they're just starting points for suspicion. The future of trade will depend on whether countries can build systems that are both transparent and fair, ones that make cheating impossible, but cooperation still worthwhile. At first glance, it was just a shipment of soybeans, but in reality, it was a mirror reflecting how fragile global trade has become. A single cargo, disguised and exposed, revealed the pressure, deception, and desperation that emerge when nations weaponize commerce. This story wasn't really about agriculture. It was about trust. Trust between farmers and buyers, between nations and trading partners, between documents and reality. Once that trust breaks, even a billion-dollar system can crumble overnight. The rejection at Tangan Port sent a powerful message. In this new era, truth is traceable. Science can reveal what politics tries to hide, and even a single bean carries the fingerprint of its origin. Technology like blockchain may soon make it impossible to fake where something comes from, but until that future arrives, every shipment, every deal, every handshake carries a question: who do you believe? For China, the scandal was a warning turned into an opportunity to tighten its systems, protect its food security, and assert control. For the U.S., it was a painful reminder that economic power doesn't guarantee market access. And for the rest of the world, it was proof that in today's global economy, truth has become a competitive advantage. So the next time you see a label that says "Made in," remember, behind those two words lies a story of soil, politics, and human choices. The soybeans that tried to change their identity might have failed, but they succeeded in showing the world one simple truth. In modern trade, honesty isn't just moral, it's measurable. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive stories about how global trade, politics, and technology shape our world.